second Earth Day Facebook Live event. Happy Earth Day to everyone, and happy Earth Day to you, Dr. Ingraffea.
And happy Earth Day to you, Maya, and everybody who's watching.
So we won't get started just yet, but I thought it might be fun while we're waiting, giving people time to chime in. If you could tell us a little bit about what you've been doing on your Earth Day so far.
Wow. Okay. Got up with the usual dawn and went and got the newspaper to read all the latest news about what's happening in the virus situation. Went out and tried to do something to protect my fruit trees from the freeze that we had again last night. Then watched, there's a new event that my wife and I watch every day. We watch Governor Cuomo, right? You want to get the facts. Joe Friday on TV every day. Just the facts, ma'am. And then I confirmed that one day late, but nonetheless, just about on time, I'm picking up 24 tree seedlings from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation tomorrow in Cortland. And I will be planting 24 trees tomorrow. I wanted to do it today, but things were a little bit late. But I'm going to go pick them up tomorrow. And then the rest of the time I've been preparing for this and rereading parts of the book.
Well, I was going to say, we needed you today to inspire people with your words of wisdom on the Green Amendment movement and climate change and fossil fuels and everything you are so super smart about.
Well, okay. The first thing I'm going to say is go plant a tree, at least one, or at least don't kill one. Okay, you can't plant one, don't kill one.
Well, we are at 2:03, and right? Are we there yet? Yes. And anybody who knows me knows that I always start my meetings on a prime number, and that's in honor of my mother, Marika Weissmuller, who was a mathematician and loved prime numbers. So I always try to do primes in honor of my wonderful mother. And I want to introduce our guest. So we have Dr. Anthony Ingraffea. He's the Dwight C. Baum Professor at Cornell's School of Engineering. And I'm sure it's not called the School of Engineering. I'm sure it's called Engineering and something. But
Environmental, School of Civil and Environmental Engineering.
There you go.
Good
there
for today.
And so, Tony has been really at the forefront of the protecting us from climate crisis movement, shall I put it that way, and really helping Delaware Riverkeeper Network and communities across the nation understand the science and the facts when it comes to the climate crisis and fossil fuels and the link between the two. So that's my introduction of you, Tony, but I thought maybe you could tell people in your own words a little bit about yourself and what you've done with your career and what you're doing now.
Oh, wow. Okay. So start at the beginning. Was looking for something to do with my mind. Back in the 1970s, I went to grad school at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Actually, I went there basically to move wife and kid to a beautiful place to live. And by freaky accident, I wound up doing a PhD in, ready for this? Rock fracture mechanics. How do you break rock? Okay, no jokes, okay. Okay, so who in the late 1970s was interested in breaking rock? Let me think. Let's see, oil, gas, coal, geothermal. So here we are on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Most people who are watching probably weren't around for the first one. And most of them probably weren't around for what was happening in the mid to late 70s about energy crisis. The beginning of an ongoing energy crisis, as it turns out. So I got to be in the right place at the right time, just by freaky accident, because as soon as I finished at Colorado, I came to Cornell, been here since. And I got to do lots and lots of research and consulting for the oil and gas industry. because they wanted to learn how to break rock better. The better you can break rock, the easier it is to get stuff out of the rock: oil, gas, coal. And I did that consulting and research until the early 2000s. And I got away from it then. Actually, I should say the industry got away from me because they figured they knew everything at that point. This is before shale.
Mm-hmm.
Before shale. Also known as BS. And then 6 or 7 years later, I realized that they had figured out how to get access to what I call the darkest, dankest, rat-infested corner of the fossil fuel reservoir, shale. And when I figured out how they figured it out, I was appalled, disgusted, just really, really taken aback. So I got back into research in oil and gas, but this time from the other side of the fence. So now I used to be the great friend, now I'm the great enemy. So to sum up, what I've been doing for the last 10 or so years is what I've always done since the 1970s at Colorado. I do research. I read, I write, I do experiments, I do observations, you propose hypotheses, you go out and test them, and then you tell people what you learned and discovered. So focused particularly on the issues of wellbore integrity. Why do oil and gas wells leak? Sometimes they leak into an underground source of drinking water, as you well know. And even more often, they leak greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So, and also on methane emissions in general from the oil and gas industry, having to do with pipeline operations and oil and gas production. So our latest paper literally appeared on Monday of this week. Mm-hmm. We did a 4-year-long study of how methane leaks from oil and gas operations in Pennsylvania, in particular operating oil and gas wells. Nobody had looked at that before. Everybody assumed that you drill a well, it goes into production, everything's fine. But a significant percentage of wells that are in production still leak methane into the atmosphere. So we wanted to quantify that leakage and compare it to other measures of leakage and figure out whether the industry was doing a good job of fixing their leaking wells.
And the answer is?
There are two answers. The first answer to the first question is it's a significant amount of leakage in Pennsylvania, at the scale of Pennsylvania. And when we hypothesize that what we see in Pennsylvania is probably similar to what's happening across the US and other states and in Canada, then the amount of leakage of methane from this previously unmeasured source is very significant. Answer to the second question, does the industry do a good job of fixing its leaking wells? As an industry, no. Some operators, yes. Most operators, no.
I think the thing that's, are you hearing an echo?
Just begin.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good. I'm
right. Then it's just me, so that's fine. I can hear myself echo. So I think the thing that's so important about your expertise and your experience and your history is for people to understand that when you speak about fossil fuels and fracking and climate change, your perspective is informed by the science.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's how you've come to this position of very powerful and persuasive opposition. And so that's why it's always important to me for you to be able to highlight that for folks. I was wondering if you can share, based on all this knowledge you have, what do you think about what's happening with the fossil fuel industry, with fracking? Let's first talk pre-pandemic, and then we can talk since pandemic.
Okay. Pre-pandemic, the most significant thing that has happened in the last 15, 20 years is what President Trump calls energy supremacy or energy dominance in the U.S. because of shale. The only thing that kept us from a faster transition away from fossil fuels onto renewable energy in this century was the advent of shale, the advent of the ability to extract oil and gas from shale, which basically came into being somewhere around 2001, 2002. So that's what began to happen about 20 years ago, and it reached a crescendo so that pre-COVID-19, 3 months ago, the U.S. was the largest producer of oil of all the countries on the face of the earth, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, and the largest producer of natural gas on earth. Gee, what could be wrong with that? Well, wrong time, wrong place. What shale did, what the industry did specifically in the U.S. in shale, is to set us back 20 years in the energy transition, because it made oil and gas plentiful and cheap. So it elongated the fossil fuel era by a half a generation. That's where things were going, and that's where things were going to stay for the foreseeable future, because at least for the next 10 or 15 years, until all of our shale oil and gas runs out, 10 or 15 years, it would all be gone. A lot of people are going to make money, and all of the harms, local and global, from a vastly increased production of oil and gas in this country would have continued for another 10, 15, 20 years. And as most of your viewers know, those 10 or 15 or 20 years are the most crucial years that we have left to do something significant about climate change. So it was an impediment, a roadblock, a diversion from what we should have been doing 20 years ago. That's all pre-February 1st. And then COVID-19. So I'm just recounting the most significant things that happened in the last 2 months. Because of the essential shutdown of most of the world's economic activity, demand for oil and gas began to plummet. So here we go into Econ 101, supply and demand, right? We were flooding the world with oil and gas. Everybody was producing a lot of oil and gas. And since the U.S. had come up very rapidly in production compared to the other countries, OPEC and non-OPEC countries, the world was awash in oil and gas. And suddenly the demand precipitously dropped. So prices dropped. Econ 101. In January, the average price for oil, depending upon which market you're looking at, was about $50 per barrel. And the average price for natural gas in the U.S. was about $2.50 per 1,000 cubic feet. Sorry about all the numbers, but you asked. Mm-hmm. So demand plummeted. Supplies were very high. Price collapsed. The other two big players, Russia and Saudi Arabia, got pissed at each other, pardon my French. So initially they were pointing fingers at each other. They were the two second and third biggest producers, and they were saying, you drop your supply. No, you drop your supply. Okay, well, this is where it gets even more complex, because you can't talk about oil and gas supply, demand, and where the future is going unless you talk about money. So the three things you need to know, what your observers need to know, is that to produce a barrel of oil in the United States profitably, you got to get a price of at least $40 to $50 a barrel. To produce oil or gas, to produce oil profitably in Russia, you need to get a price of about $20 a barrel. To produce oil profitably in Saudi Arabia, you need to get a price of about $8 a barrel. Oops. So by early February, the prices were plummeting, 50, 40, 30, 25. And the Russians and the Saudis are really getting worried, but the Saudis weren't as worried as the Russians. And the US producers were really, really worried because, whoa, man, we can't make a profit with any of our wells. And then it got worse. So the Saudis and the Russians agreed that they would cut production as long as everybody else agreed to cut production. Everybody agreed to cut production by 10%. So again, supply and demand. If you cut production, you're decreasing supply, but demand had already dropped by 30 or 40%, and you're only cutting supply by 10%, so that's not enough. So that pushed the market even lower. And then reality set in. The world was awash in oil before the virus. We didn't shut down on a worldwide scale supply fast enough. So we kept producing it through February and March. Demand was plummeting. We weren't using it. Where's it going? We already got it out of the ground. You can't put it back down the hole. You can't say, hey, well, reverse yourself. Suck the oil back down. You have to store it someplace on the surface, like in ships, in storage tanks, and underground storage facilities. Well, those all filled up. So now you got dozens of tankers that are doing circles in the ocean, waiting to come ashore to dump their oil. And producers in the US are still producing, those that are still can, and they have no place to put their oil. So we had this phenomenon that occurred earlier this week where at one point the price of oil became negative. So in other words, investor groups who had purchased contracts to buy oil at a certain price and then sell it for a profit were told, we don't want your oil. You can't sell it to us. Now, if you pay us, we'll take it. In other words, investors got upside down. They thought they were going to make, say, $50 a barrel, but they were having to pay $37 a barrel for somebody to physically take the oil off their hands. So a lot of investors lost a hell of a lot of money. And so a lot of companies are going under. A lot of investors have literally lost their shirts. And that's a very long answer to your two-part question, but let me answer part 3, what's going to happen next. The U.S. will no longer be energy dominant over certainly the next 6 months to a year because the industry is in turmoil. Too many companies will have gone belly up. We still have this huge oversupply of oil and gas. We're going into the summer months, which is typically the time you don't use very much natural gas. We're still not going to be doing a lot of driving and a lot of flying for the foreseeable future, and those are the two demand sources for the use of oil and gasoline and kerosene and diesel. So the next thing that's going to happen is Trump will try to give hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money to the oil and gas industry. That I'm sure of. Other than that, I can't be sure of the next thing that's going to happen, except it will not be business as usual for the foreseeable future. And then the next question you're going to ask, is this an opportunity for fundamental change? Fundamental organic change. Go ahead. I read your mind.
While you're answering that, I'm going to hop off. You answer for the audience, and I'm going to hop back in to try to stop the echo on my end. So you keep going and answer that really important question.
Okay. So the question I asked, hypothetically, is, given that the oil and gas industry is in turmoil, the leaders of the oil and gas industry don't know what to do next. They don't know when supply and demand, if ever, are going to come into synchronization. They can't forecast earnings. They can forecast losses and their losses in the foreseeable future. Question, is this an opportunity for us as a country and for the world to step back and say, well, the model that we had wasn't working for a number of points of view. It wasn't working economically for very many countries. And it certainly wasn't working very well from a climate change point of view. And here we have the industry on its knees. Can we now, here's my hope, get to where we were in 2001, which is the industry is dying. let's go through the energy transformation that we inevitably will have to go through. Even if we had not had COVID, even if things stayed rosy, peachy keen for the oil and gas industry, 10 or 15 years from now, it's all gone. And by that time, we will have had to transform to a renewable energy economy on a global basis. Well, now is the opportunity to address the bad decisions we made 20 years ago and force that process, quick transformation, to quicken. Here's the opportunity. Can we grab that opportunity? Well, our king isn't going to allow us, to his best ability, to grab that opportunity. Can we overrule the king? Who's in charge?
That's a great question I'm so echoing. All right. Well, we're going to forge forth. So one of the things I just want to ask you, so being mindful of the importance of this transition at the federal level and the state level, and being mindful of the Green Amendment concept and the right to, getting people a constitutional right to a healthy environment. Do you think advancing these amendments in other states could be helpful?
Okay, your echo drowned you out right then, so I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, so you're gonna answer, and I'm gonna
try moving back about 6 inches.
Okay.
Try that.
Nope, that didn't work. Did that work?
Works for me. Now
Perfect.
There's no.
Great. Now you can answer the question.
Ask the question again.
So, thinking about this idea of getting people a constitutional right to a healthy environment, do you think that if we can get green amendments in states across the nation and ultimately at the federal level, that becomes an opportunity to help advance the transition that you're talking about?
Absolutely. I would say it's a sine qua non. So much for Latin nowadays. We learned a lot of Latin phrases in the last year, didn't we? Without which there's nothing. That's what it means. If we had amendments like that in every state and at the federal level, clean air, clean water, healthy environment, from a legal point of view, as you have proven in the state of Pennsylvania, from a legal point of view, it would make things a lot easier to force this transition to happen faster. Look what we just learned. Look how vulnerable, look how sensitive humanity is to very small changes. Let me make sure you understand, everybody. One person, a single one of the 7.7 billion people on Earth, walked into a fish market in Wuhan, China, and killed the oil and gas industry. Think about that for a minute, or at least 10 seconds.
Wow.
There's an example of vulnerability, sensitivity that the 7.6 billion people on the face of the earth are now experiencing. How can the act? We used to laugh when I was in graduate school. People used to talk about chaos theory. What happens if a butterfly flaps its wing in China? Will it rain in Germany? Sure as hell did, except it wasn't a butterfly, it was a bat.
So I would say, when we think about energy and the need for gas for transportation, I know in my family, similar to your setup, we have solar panels and an electric car at my primary residence, but we also have a home that's off grid, so that we are totally disconnected. That's solar and also all electric. And as we're thinking about this crisis, we're spending more and more time at that off-grid home, because just as you said, so we are not vulnerable to the lack of fossil fuels because we're not dependent on it. Do you want to speak to that from your experience with your home and household? I know you've worked so hard on your clean, renewable energy home.
Sure. And by the way, I was going to ask you whether you were spending time at the cabin. I really remember taking that rock walk with you. You have some beautiful rocks in your woods. Remember, I'm a rock guy. I like looking at cracks in the rock. And when you showed me the cracks and the rocks in your woods, I was really impressed.
So people who watch the film, that's where we did the interview with Tony.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you, we walk the walk. No one wants to be called a hypocrite. So I'm sitting in our home office place where we watch movies in our home. It's a relatively new home. We built it from scratch in 2015 as a passive house design, built to German passive house standards. That means it's ultra insulated. It's very tight. No infiltration, exfiltration. We have 15 kilowatts of solar PV on our roof. We have an air source heating and cooling system. And we use net metering, the grid as a battery. So over the course of a year, our total utility bill for the house last year was about $500. That's for grid electricity that we had to use during the winter months when we didn't have very much solar. Like you, we have 2 electric cars. We have an electric car, a battery electric vehicle, and a hybrid battery electric vehicle. So our carbon footprint from the point of view of both CO2 and methane is, I think, negative because we don't use very much gasoline at all. I haven't filled up my hybrid electric this year yet because just driving around town, you don't need to. And our electric car never uses gasoline. We do not have a gas line coming into our house. That was rule number 1 when we built the house. No gas comes into this house. So we don't even burn anything. And we own and maintain about 120 acres of woods. So our trees are thousands of trees, are carbon sinks. We planted thousands of those trees. I think there's tens of thousands of trees on 120 acres because we planted thousands of them over the years. And as I said, we're going to be planting a titular 24 of them, not very many. But it's just me. I don't have anybody to help me at this point. I used to have graduate students, and this is the way it used to work. My PhD students would hand me a chapter of their thesis to proofread, and I would not approve it unless they planted 100 trees. So over the years, we planted at least 1,000 trees in those chapters. But I'll be digging the holes tomorrow myself. So yeah, everybody has to do their part. The question that gets asked very frequently of you and me, what can an individual do to fight climate change? It's the same thing as saying, what can one voter do in an election? It's an absurd question. Hey, we got a question.
Yeah. No. So.
Oh, I got it. I see it. It's for us. So what can individuals do? Well, you and I just named some of the things you can do. We can control energy consumption in our houses. We can control energy consumption in our transportation modes. We can control energy consumption where we work to a certain degree. And then the usual democratic provisions. We vote, we pay taxes. But over and above that, we can do what you have done much more than I've done, which is to educate the public. Get out there. You wrote a book, and you've been all over the country. And you tell people, here are the facts. This is the data. This is the science. This is where we are. This is where we're going if we keep doing what we're doing. And this is where we could go and if we do something different. And for you, the story has been, let's start at the top. Let's start at the most powerful legal means available in our country so far. Let's start at the constitutional level and make the most fundamental rights clear. Here's an aside. I'm absolutely convinced at this point, Maya, that if our founding fathers had among them a founding mother, that mother would have said, wait, before we get to freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom to carry a gun, let's talk about fundamental freedoms: the freedom to breathe, the freedom to drink clean water, and the freedom to enjoy a natural environment, one that has not been seriously impinged and harmed by human activity. So you start at the top. I sort of work up from the bottom because I'm basically a rock guy. So my research and my speeches and my talks are all sort of geologically based. Yours are ultimately legal based, and that's where we meet.
Well, and in the Act 13 case, the challenge against the pro-fracking Act 13, that where we secured the legal decision that breathed legal life into Pennsylvania's Green Amendment, a fundamental underpinning of the Chief Justice Castile's writing was to begin with an acknowledgement that drilling and fracking would produce irreparable harm on the natural resources fundamental to life. And then that got married with Senator Curry's Environmental Rights Amendment, and it was all argued by Jordan Yeager, complemented by John Smith and Jonathan Kamen, also on the legal team. But with Jordan really being the champion for Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment. But your role as a scientist was fundamentally important to securing that outcome. And so I wonder, Tony, when you read the decision in December of 2013 that said that the provisions of Act 13 we were challenging should fall because they violated the constitutional rights of the people to a healthy environment, knowing that you had played such a fundamentally important role in securing that decision, what were your reactions in the moment and then sort of as time went on?
Wow, beautiful question. Now, I was reminded when I watched the trailer that Steve put together and you interviewed the judge, I was reminded of the feelings you're asking me to recall. Because when I read his opinion, and I got to the point where he made it very clear, both in his opinion and in the video that you just made with him, that he recognized the scientific fact that harm is being done, harm has been done, and more importantly, harm will continue to be done. Wow. My first reaction was, holy crap, he got it. This is a legal scholar. He's not a scientist. He's not an engineer. He doesn't know flowback from toothpaste. Okay? But he got it. So he must have read stuff that he believed. And I bet he didn't read stuff on a blog. And I bet he didn't read stuff in a tweet. He actually read vetted reports and peer-reviewed scientific papers, and he believed them. The only other time that I felt a similar exultation was when the jury came back in the Dimmick trial.
Can you tell folks about that trial? Yeah.
I'll have to tell you about the Dimmick trial. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But you asked the second part of the question, what have I thought since that opinion that essentially overthrew the worst parts of Act 13? We're back at risk. We sort of going backwards a bit in Pennsylvania, but a lot outside of Pennsylvania because of the current administration trying to undo regulations that were put into effect to try to minimize the harms that Judge Castillo recognized were real and present dangers. So, yeah, I'm worried that we've undermined a lot of progress we made, and a lot more of it is at risk. And that sort of takes us back to Dimmick, because a very similar thing happened. So for those of you who are watching who don't, what's Dimmick? Dimmick is a small non-town in northeastern Pennsylvania. It's a crossroads in northeastern Pennsylvania, which happens to sit right on top of the most profitable, prolific sources of shale gas on the face of the earth. No place else on the face of the earth can you drill a well into a shale formation than in Dimmick, Pennsylvania, and get more gas out of a well at a lower cost. That's it. It's sort of the bullseye of shale gas. And one company leased up most of that area around Dimock, Pennsylvania in 2006, 2007, 2008, and drilled a hell of a lot of wells in a very short period of time without really understanding the geology very much. And they caused irreparable harm to the water supplies of many families. I'm condensing 12 years of history here into 1 minute and 20 seconds. So long and the short of it is there eventually came a time when two of the families sought legal relief by going to trial, by bringing a civil suit against this company for ruining their water supplies. And took 7 years of legal wrangling back and forth to get a trial in a federal court in front of a jury of 8 peers in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And when the trial was over, the jury came back with a unanimous verdict for the families. So I was sitting here in this house, and I got the phone call from somebody in Scranton saying, hey, the jury came in, guess what? We won. And the same feeling I got when I read Judge Castillo's opinion. And then a year later, the judge threw out the jury verdict. So are there attempts right now to undermine the precedent-setting, legal precedent-setting opinions in Pennsylvania? Sure. In other states, absolutely. There's always going to be that because there's money involved. You know, the companies with the most money and with the most lobbying and with the most expensive and best lawyers will continue to do what they do best, which is grab whatever they can for themselves and their shareholders.
Tony, have you had much opportunity, I'm putting you on the spot, to reflect on what's happening in New Mexico and sort of this heightened focus on the Permian Basin by the industry?
Yes.
I have a question, but I want to make sure that you've thought about it first.
So a little bit of history here. The Permian Basin has been, over the last 100 years, the most prolific source of oil production in the U.S. And it was drying up. People have pretty much given up on it as a major source of oil production until about 10 years ago, when people realized that there's a lot of shale that hadn't been properly attacked with the right kind of hydraulic stimulation. And so over the last 5, 6, 7 years, again, the Permian Basin came back to life. Literally, it's like a devil popped back out of the ground and said, here I am, you never got all of me, come and get me. And so the Permian became the epicenter of the resurgence in the last 5 years of oil production in the U.S. The oil production from shale sort of blew up in North Dakota and Montana, and then in South Texas, not the Permian part of Texas, the southern part of Texas. And then people say, hey, wait, the Permian. And so millions of barrels, a million barrels a day or more of oil was coming out, then 2 million barrels a day of just the Permian. And what happened was sort of a presage to what happened just in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So many new wells were drilled and so many old wells were re-stimulated that production exceeded the capacity to get this stuff out of the state, the oil. And the gas that came with it, inevitably there's gas that comes out of oil wells too, that was all just vented and flared because there was no pipeline capacity. Who the hell wanted to get gas out of the Permian? It's a long story behind that. So all this natural gas was just being vented and flared into the atmosphere. CO2 and methane, poof, gone into the atmosphere, global warming. And they were trying to get as much oil as they could by train and by pipeline out of the Permian to storage facilities and to places where it could be transshipped and exported. And that was going like gangbusters until 2 months ago. And now the Permian is dead again. So towns are drying up. People have been laid off. People have lost their jobs. Pickup truck payments won't be made. Man parks are now empty. Companies are losing their shirts. And once again, the boom bust cycle rears its ugly head.
So
The people don't deserve that. I mean, you think it's easy for us to say, when are they going to learn? You know, how many times can you get upside the head with a 2x4 in a boom bust oil gas cycle before you learn that over the course of one generation, you're going to lose your job once or twice. That's the history. But there's always money in it. There's always more oil and gas to be had, at least for the foreseeable future, next 10 or 15 years, until they finally realize that was it. We're done.
So in New Mexico, there's tremendous energy from the people to advance a green amendment, right? The constitutional right to pure water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments. And of course, the oil and gas industry, even in this moment, when it comes to politics and politicians, you know, has a powerful place at the table. In all your experience and all the different communities you've worked with across the country, sharing with them your expertise and your talent for pushing back with the truth on the industry, do you see, even in a place like that right now, a green amendment being a useful tool for adding to their palette of effort?
Now's the time to strike. Now is it? Okay, so I'm going to use an analogy here. Not an analogy, an old saying. Sort of has a negative connotation to it, but I think you'll get the analogy here. Okay, if you're going to attack the king, make sure you finish the job. Or strike while the iron is hot. Or don't put off till today, till tomorrow. What you should do today, you pick your saying. I would think that the people of New Mexico, especially the people in the southeastern corner of New Mexico, which is where the Permian underlies New Mexico, have had enough. Enough of this. It was pie in the sky, what we were promised. We had it for 4 or 5 years. Some of us got rich. Most of us just watched our environment get raped again. Enough of this. And we're not going to let it happen again. This is the time for people to, in place, concretize, etch in stone, carve in concrete, whatever you want to say, a law that says we shall not let this happen again. Not here, not now, not ever. Now is the time.
Now,
and I would say get on a plane and get there, Maya, tomorrow, but I know you can't. But you have friends there. You have friends.
Well, I'm communicating. We did learn some really wonderful news today on Earth Day. You know, I always view the Green Amendment, and I know you do too, right? And the environment as a nonpartisan issue. And so I hope that both parties do this. But we did learn that in New Mexico, that the Democratic Party has added to their 2020 platform the goal of passing a New Mexico Green Amendment. So maybe now, you know, all the parties in the state will be inspired to join with them. So that was some really good news. But I did want to ask you, though, Tony, now we know this can be a powerful tool with the oil and gas industry, and we know the oil and gas industry is going to be one of our biggest opponents. But one of the people on Facebook asked, what kinds of businesses, industries would be supportive or should be supportive of a Green Amendment concept? Do we have any natural business allies?
Oh, geez. Let's see. To the extent that there's still unions, the electrical unions, the plumbing unions, the automotive unions. Gee, what do they have to gain from electrifying the country? Electrifying transportation, electrifying home heating, home cooling, hot water, cooking. Yeah. Even if you're not a member of a union, but you're a member of that trade, you're an electrician, you're a plumber, you're into light manufacturing, you don't mind walking on roofs, you don't mind climbing high places. By now, people should understand that there are far more jobs that have been grown in the renewable energy industry in the last 10 years than have been grown in the oil and gas industry. And let me just say that the number of jobs that have been lost in the oil and gas industry in the last 3 months is a major portion of the unemployment rate in the United States. And they're not going to get their jobs back, not this time. So if you're interested in joining something that isn't going to have a boom bust cycle, it's not like there's going to be an oversupply of sunshine or an undersupply of sunshine sometime soon, or an oversupply of wind or an undersupply of wind, or an oversupply or undersupply of earth source heat. Those are constants. Okay. The ability to get oil or gas out of the ground varies with the whim of the almighty dollar and the winds of geopolitical change. You can't, as an individual worker, have any influence or control on that. But you can rest assured, if you're working in the renewable energy industry, that the fuel supply is constant.
Now, many politicians and pro-fossil fuel industry types, right? They will say that if you go with renewable energy, then when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, you're left cold, miserable, hungry, and in the dark. What's your answer to that?
BS. And that's not Bachelor of Science. That is so, that statement on the part of people who should know is willfully deceptive and ignorant. For people who don't understand the fundamentals of renewable energy, let me try to set the record straight. It is absolutely certain that sometimes the wind doesn't blow in position A. And it's absolutely certain that the sun doesn't shine sometimes in position B. And it's absolutely certain that we live in a highly connected, from an electrical point of view, world. We have a national grid. We have an interconnected series of local grids. So if the wind isn't blowing in western New York, maybe it's blowing in eastern New York. Okay. Yes, the sun doesn't shine at night, and during the winter months in New York, you don't get very much sun because you get a lot of snow on your solar panels. But our older son, who by the way was born on Earth year 1970, he lives in North Carolina. The sun isn't shining here; the sun's shining there. Okay, so what about at night? What happens if the wind doesn't blow at night and the sun doesn't shine at night? Doesn't everything shut down? No. No, we can transport electricity over long distances. We can transport electric from hydro over long distances. Why is it that people can accept the notion, follow this for a minute, that up until a few years ago, when we lived in our older house and my wife cooked on natural gas, she turned the gas stove on and the gas that we were burning to boil water came from the Gulf of Mexico, 2,000 miles away by pipeline. People can accept that there are pipelines for gas. People can accept there are pipelines for oil. Why do they not get the notion that the grid is a series of pipelines, electrical pipelines? We can pipe in electricity from wherever it's being produced. So if the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing where you're sitting right now, we can always get it from someplace else. Other thing, so we're talking about this concept of intermittency. Sometimes the sun shines, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes the wind blows, sometimes it doesn't. There's also the concept of storage. We can store electricity at a time that we don't need as much. So during the middle of the day, You don't need as much electricity as you do early in the morning and late at night in most places. So when the sun is shining at midday and you're not using as much electricity, you store it. How do you store it? Well, there are many kinds of batteries. There are virtual batteries and real batteries. And there's another technology, by the way, where there are jobs. So if you're into manufacturing segments that are needed for manufacturing of batteries, or you're into the chemistry, or you're into the mining of the materials that are necessary to make batteries and solar panels, there are plenty of jobs for people who used to be hard rock miners, mining the wrong kind of stuff. For miners who used to mine coal, you want to still be a miner, but be in a mine that isn't most likely going to give you black lung.
So this is a great segue for a question that we got. This is from a law student. It says, many of my fellow law students, I think this applies to some science folks too. Many of my fellow law students feel that working for the industry is how they will create change. Given your experience, do you agree or disagree?
Both. Both. So I've worked with the industry. I worked with the industry for 25 years. I was never directly employed, but I was a consultant. And I took their money to help my graduate students get their PhD degrees at Cornell. So I understand working with an industry to try to exact change from the inside. And to a certain degree, that's already beginning to happen. So many of the larger oil and gas companies are starting to make better noises than they used to make. And to some degree, I'm beginning to believe them, not completely. So if you want to go to work as an attorney for Exxon or Chevron or BP or Mobil, go for it. As long as you don't get swallowed up, as long as you have courage, as long as you recognize that there are always people in those companies who know the right thing to do. But there are also people who know the right thing to do, but have the power to force it not to happen. So some of my best friends that I formed in the 1970s, 80s, 90s are still working in the oil and gas industry. I have great respect for them. They're scientists and engineers of great repute and capability. And I know for a fact that they want to do the right thing. But the public relations people in that company and the CEO and the board of directors, not so much. So if you think you can get on the inside and influence, go for it. I'm not in a position to say no. I took their money at some point. And now I'm using the expertise and the knowledge and the experience I gained from using their money to help work against their nefarious objectives. Now, if Exxon and BP and Chevron want to announce sometime in the next few months that they've seen the light, their shareholders finally said enough is enough. This boom bust. We're not getting our dividends this year. You cut our dividends to zero, and our stock holdings are, pretty much worthless at this point. But you employ 300,000 people worldwide, and you have tremendous in-house expertise. All those scientists and engineers that you've been bringing along, convert them. Make Exxon the #1 green energy producer in the world. Make BP #2. Make Chevron #3. If you can get a job to help them do that, more power to you.
So you do work with communities across the nation. I know that you have shared your expertise, and I don't think it's a secret, but for those who don't know, Tony shares his expertise not just freely, but for free, so that nobody can ever accuse him of being bought and paid for. So when he was our expert on the Act 13 case, when he was the expert on the Dimmick case and in other key cases, that was just Tony giving of himself and his knowledge and refusing to accept any payment. In fact, when I try to buy him dinner, he refuses that too, even a cup of coffee, just to make it absolutely clear.
I took the hat.
Oh,
I took the Delaware Riverkeeper hat and the t-shirt.
Now you're bought off.
Because I wear them when I fish.
Well, that's good. That was just because you're great environmentalist. But if you want people to,
You said there were some lawyers who asked questions. So here's a point I want to make I want to say something to those lawyers that's relevant to the point you're making right now. So I work pro bono. So I'm on the stand in a Dimmick case. Okay, you lawyers that are listening and watching, I'm on the stand in a Dimmick case. And I'm being questioned by the chief attorney for Cabot Oil and Gas. This guy works for the number 6 law firm in the world. His suit costs more than my car. And he says, Dr. Ingraffea, how much are you being paid for your testimony? And I said, nothing. And he said, good, that's what it's worth.
That's offensive.
Yeah. That's a trial attorney doing what trial attorneys do, right? One way or another, you discredit the witness for the other side. So let's see, if I'm free, that's about what I'm worth. So why should the jury listen to me? I didn't cost anything. I'm free. If I had said I was paid $500 an hour, like their witness was being paid, they would have said, "Oh, you're just
You're
a whore, right?
Yeah.
You're a legal whore." So that's what they do. That's their job. Fine. Smile. Go on.
That's an interesting anecdote. Although, being an attorney, I would say that they will only get legal representation to do their bad stuff if somebody's willing to represent them, right? It's like every bad thing that happens in the world, it can only happen if people are willing to make it happen, including for the almighty dollar. So, but I do want to ask you, with all these communities that you work with, I know for myself how many times I've gone to a really powerful, empowering rally, and not in Pennsylvania and not in Montana where they have green amendments, and inevitably you hear, and we all have a right to clean water and we all have a right to clean air. Do you have that same experience? The people do you work with, do you think people actually believe that they have a legally enforceable right to these things? Do they understand that unless it's in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution, you have an inalienable right, you have a human right, but you don't have a legally enforceable right?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think that most people don't know that they don't have that right. Huh? I've had conversations where we get on this topic and they say, wait a minute, the Constitution guarantees us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I said, that's not the Constitution. It's the Declaration of Independence. Little difference. The founding fathers, darn, there's no mother, said, yeah, we should have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They should have translated that into the Constitution in the way that Pennsylvania and Montana have, and what you're trying to do with all the other constitutions, including our federal, which is translate life into meaning the necessities of life. And that's not toilet paper. It's clean air and clean water. Okay, so no, I don't think people understand that they don't have those rights yet, except in Pennsylvania and Montana. So what you're doing is another opportunity to inform, to erase that ignorance, to say, wait, you need to know something. You don't yet have those rights enshrined at the highest level in your state. You need that. That's a clear message, and it's a message that has to be given again and again as you're doing it. And it's a message that's very easily understood, because then people say, oh, really? Declaration of Independence isn't the Constitution? No, it's not.
So I want to note two comments that have come in. One is a heartfelt thank you for sharing your expertise. Another comment, I think in response to your lawyer story, was, quote, "That's a bad lawyer!" Exclamation point. So and I would say that's a good law student making that comment. We are coming to the end of our hour. I'm going to hold you over just a little bit more, because I wanted to know, Tony, just, you have such an incredible wealth of knowledge and experience in states without a green amendment, now in states with a green amendment. You helped give legal life to Pennsylvania's green amendment in December of 2013. just all your knowledge and wisdom and experiences and thoughts. On this Earth Day, do you have a message that you would like to share with everybody who's watching?
I should have anticipated that question, so you got to give me 7 seconds here to think. Okay, how about this one? The last thing I said in the last class I taught, in which you were a lecturer last semester. Maya was gracious enough to physically come to my classroom at Cornell University and give a lecture to my course called Climate Change and You, the Engineer. And it got to be the last day of class. And I had Mark Ruffalo come into class. And, you know, the kids were aghast. And he gave them lots of stuff to think about. And when he was done, and I was standing there in front of the class, it was the last class I'm ever going to teach at Cornell. It was the last day, it was the last minute of the last class I'm ever going to teach. What do I say to him? It's simple. Listen to Greta. Because these are 18 and 19-year-olds. To a certain degree, they listen to me. I was 4 times their age. I mean, you're not going to take that much from a guy with this kind of hair. But I wanted them to listen to somebody of their generation who had it here and had it here. I said, listen to Greta. So there's a message for everybody. I'm glad there were some law students listening to this. I'm hoping there are some 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds that were watching this. You and I have had this discussion, Maya. We're not doing this so much for my generation or your generation. We're one generation apart. I'm doing this for your generation and the next generation, my grandchildren. They have to, they're the potential benefactors of what we're doing now. So the message for Earth Day is the same message that Cuomo was giving every day. You're staying at home, you're social distancing, not just for yourself, you're doing it for everybody else. It's the all-encompassing we. Don't listen to what Ayn Rand had to say about individualism. Listen to what Greta has to say about family and community. There's my message.
And I would say listen to what Tony Ingraffea has to say, because it's really powerful and inspiring. And you are really helping to lead the way to a better world with all of your great works. And I can't thank you enough for everything that you do for all of us all the time.
Reflects back on you. You too, Maya. Same thing I would say. You said to me, I got to say to you. So thank you. Thanks for this opportunity.
I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your Earth Day. Enjoy planting those trees. I have a whole bunch of native plants that I'm planting this weekend. Looking forward to that as well. So thank you so much, Tony, and thank you everybody who joined us. You actually can find Tony online a lot talking about the oil and gas industry and climate change and the science. And so if you want to learn more about this, if you're engaged in battles with the industry or the pipeline companies, just type in Tony's name and you'll find a wealth of resources. So again, thank you so much, Tony. Have a great, great, awesome day.
You too, Maya. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.